العمر جنبك وبرضه ما يكفيش أحلى دنيا عندي ما تساويش إلا معاك يا رسول الله. وحشنا يا رسول الله يا سيدنا شوقنا زاد والله مهما طول الغياب محمد مشتاق إليك والله محمد قلبي عليك صلى. طال سؤالي قولي ازاي كده عشق عيوننا حد مش شايفه لو حقيقي هو غالي عليك ارضيه في الجنة تبقى معاه. وحشنا يا رسول الله يا سيدنا شوقنا زاد والله مهما طول الغياب محمد مشتاق إليك والله محمد قلبي عليك صلى. ده أنا زاد في قلبي حنين ودموعي مالية العين طمعان بقالي سنين إني أزور المصطفى مرة إني أزور المصطفى مرة. وحشنا يا رسول الله يا سيدنا شوقنا زاد والله مهما طول الغياب محمد مشتاق إليك والله محمد قلبي عليك صلى. Ku sadari engkau sanggup mengambil kembali karuniamu dan ku coba selalu mengingat takkan sia-siakan segalanya karena suatu hari semua akan tiada lagi dan di akhir hayatku mohon kau ridho padaku. Allah ya Allah tuntunku untuk tiba di jannahmu ya Allah ya Allah jangan jauh dariku ku tambah cahayamu bersamamu ku ingin dekat denganmu sepanjang usia. dampingi langkahku. Ku sadari kadang ku lupa, mungkin ini nafasku yang terakhir. Ampuni kurangnya syukurku, maafkan ku ragu kasihmu. Nanti suatu hari saat duniaku usai berakhir, di akhir hayatku mohon kau ridho pada aku. Allah, ya Allah, tuntunku untuk tiba di jannah-Mu. Ya Allah, ya Allah, jangan jauh dariku, ku tambah cahaya-Mu. Bersamamu ku ingin dekat, dekat denganmu sepanjang usia. Ya Allah, oh Allah, dampingi selalu. Hari berganti, ku yakin waktuku kian singkat. Tuhanku, biar ku genggam dunia ini tanpa mencintainya, karena ku kan segera pergi, karena ku kan segera pergi. Allah, ya Allah, tuntunku untuk tiba di jannah-Mu. Ya Allah, oh Allah, jangan jauh dariku, ku tambah cahaya-Mu. Allah, ya Allah, tuntunku untuk tiba di jannah-Mu. Ya Allah, ya Allah, jangan jauh dariku, ku tambah cahaya-Mu. Bersamamu ku ingin dekat, dekat denganmu sepanjang usia. Ya Allah, oh Allah, dampingi langkahku. Allah, ya Allah, tuntunku untuk tiba di jannah-Mu. Ya Allah, ya Allah, jangan jauh dariku, ku tambah cahaya-Mu. Bersamamu ku ingin dekat, dekat denganmu sepanjang usia. Ya Allah, oh Allah, dampingi langkahku. Tuntunlah aku setiap langkahku.
Assalamualaikum everyone, this is your brother Maher Zain. For my latest news and updates, join me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. Salam.
Selalu mengingat, takkan sia-siakan segalanya, karena suatu hari semua akan tiada lagi. Dan di akhir hayatku mohon kau ridho padaku. Allah, ya Allah, tuntunku untuk
lho. Bener di PLK Bank Jateng ku sadene wis akeh ya.
Iya ya Pak, akeh tenan. Iso dienggo kuliah anak kita nanti.
Alhamdulillah. Berkat di PLK Bank Jateng.
Iya Bank Jateng. Piye Pak ceritanya kok iso entuk saldo sakmono akeh?
Jadi bisa ini lho Bu ceritane.
Selamat pagi Pak Setio.
Pagi, Mbak.
Saya Tia Pak.
Oh, ya, monggo. Duduk, Mbak.
Ya, makasih Pak.
Ada perlu apa ya, Mbak?
Kami dari Bank Jateng Pak. Mau izin menawarkan tabungan di PLK Bank Jateng bisa Pak?
Apa aku di PLK, Mbak?
DPLK Setia Bank Jateng dengan kebebasan pilihan usia pensiun, setoran iuran yang fleksibel, dan pengembangan dana setara bunga deposito. Syarat kepesertaan, minimal berusia 18 tahun atau telah menikah, mempunyai penghasilan, mengisi formulir pendaftaran, setoran pertama minimal Rp50.000, fotokopi EKTP, KK, dan NPWP. Pendaftaran dapat dilakukan di kantor cabang atau cabang pembantu Bank Jateng.
Wah, nah aku kan PNS, Mbak. Kan sudah bakal dapat pensiunan dari kantor. Apa aku iso untuk DPLK?
DPLK Bank Jateng diperuntukkan bagi siapa saja yang ingin merencanakan hari tua. PNS pun dapat mengikuti program ini Bapak. Jadi di hari tua nanti selain Bapak dapat uang pensiunan dari kantor, Bapak juga akan mendapatkan dana pensiun dari DPLK Setia Bank Jateng.
Wah, berarti saya bisa dapat pensiunan double ya, Mbak?
Betul Bapak.
Oke, sip. Aku daftar yuk.
Bapak, ini buku tabungan dan piagam DPLK-nya sudah jadi, Cik.
Wah, makasih ya, Mbak.
Ya, sama-sama Pak.
Makasih. Jadi begitu, Bu, ceritanya.
Bapak memang hebat, suami yang luar biasa. Terima kasih loh Pak, sudah memikirkan perencanaan untuk masa depan kita. Jadi kita masa tuanya sudah ada yang untuk ditabungkan ya Pak ya?
Ibu, masih ada buat Ibu.
Iya dong Pak, Ibu juga punya ini tabungan DPLK dari Bank Jateng juga Pak. Ya kan, ini Ibu sisihkan dari hasil penjualan online. Jadi setiap bulan kita sudah bisa dapat nabung di PLK untuk masa depan kita Pak.
Wah, istriku memang luar biasa.
Iya toh Pak.
Pelaku wira swasta yang ulet dan cerdas.
Istri siapa?
DPLK Setia Bank Jateng untuk masa depan yang lebih sejahtera. Setia itu DPLK.
Berawal dari sebuah rubrik di halaman muka Harian Umum Republika bertajuk Dompet Duafa. Sebuah kolom yang rilis pada 2 Juli 1993 mendapatkan respon yang luar biasa dari pembacanya. Sebuah rubrik kecil yang pernah ada 29 tahun lalu, kini Dompet Duafa telah menjadi lembaga filantropi Islam yang terus berkhidmat untuk umat. 29 tahun waktu berjalan, Dompet Duafa terus mendapatkan kepercayaan masyarakat dari waktu ke waktu. Berjalan dengan 5 pilar program meliputi pendidikan, kesehatan, ekonomi, sosial, dakwah, dan budaya. Dompet Duafa menjadi lembaga penginisiasi rumah sakit berbasis wakaf pertama di Indonesia. Kini sudah 7 rumah sakit berbasis wakaf telah dikelola oleh Dompet Duafa. Para pasien duafa dapat dengan mudah mendapatkan akses kesehatan gratis berkat layanan kesehatan cuma-cuma. Layanan kesehatan cuma-cuma sudah hadir di 11 provinsi dengan 61 pos sehat dan 7 gerai sehat yang tersebar di seluruh wilayah Indonesia. Anak-anak yang mempunyai potensi intelijensi tinggi namun dalam keterbatasan ekonomi bisa tetap mendapatkan pendidikan berkualitas dengan Smart Excellencia. Dompet Duafa terus menumbuhkan kemandirian masyarakat melalui pemberdayaan ekonomi di sektor pertanian, peternakan, dan agroindustri. Tidak ketinggalan masyarakat di pelosok tetap terjaga pemahaman keislamannya berkat dai Cordova yang tersebar di seluruh negeri. Tatanan sosial masyarakat berubah karena pandemi COVID-19 yang menyebar ke seluruh penjuru negeri selama lebih dari 2 tahun. Saat pandemi melanda negeri, Dompet Duafa menjadi salah satu lembaga yang berjuang di garda terdepan dalam upaya pencegahan dan penanganan virus COVID-19. Di saat peristiwa tidak diinginkan terjadi, tim Disaster Management Center hadir dan selalu siap siaga membantu masyarakat yang membutuhkan baik di daerah maupun di perkotaan.
Saya bahagia Anda semua ini jadi relawan, sudah jadi relawan. Alhamdulillah, saya bersyukur. Relawan adalah orang atau insan yang siap, suka rela hatinya menolong sesama sepanjang masa dengan cinta. With and because of love.
Waktu sudah berjalan selama 29 tahun, lebih dari 24 juta jiwa masyarakat sudah merasakan kebermanfaatan yang luar biasa. Maka, Dompet Duafa akan terus berkhidmat dan menebar kebermanfaatan bagi masyarakat baik kini hingga nanti.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the International Webinar 12 Ksei Undip. This afternoon, we will step on to the next webinar session. Thus, I will hand over this session to our moderator, Professor Dr. Indah Susilowati. To Professor Indah, time and place are yours.
wabarakatuh. Dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Alhamdulillah wa syukurillah, pada siang hari ini kita bertemu lagi untuk sesi yang kedua. Since Professor Mehmet Asutai already joined, so I would like to say in English, very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope good health and prosperity always with you. And now we are joined in a 12th Sehati in a webinar, international seminar organized by the Faculty of Economic and Management University Diponegoro, and especially for the Islamic program for economics. So welcome our speaker, Professor Mehmet Asutai from Durham University. So this is a conference of, thank you very much for joining us. And we have a virtual webinar, and this webinar will be listened and joined by student, international, and also student of Diponegoro University, especially for the Islamic economics in our faculty. Semarang is situated in Central Java, Indonesia. So we have Diponegoro University as a leading university in Indonesia. We consider as one of 16 the best university in Indonesia. So from Durban, long way in UK, and then join together in Indonesia. Is traveling all over the world, but we are in one screen in international conference today. So welcome, Professor Muhammad Asutai. Before your session start, let me introduce your CV. Professor Mehmet Asutai is a professor in Middle Eastern and Islamic political economy and finance at Durham University Business School, and the director of the Durban Center in Islamic Economics and Finance, as well as program director in Islamic Finance Master Program. So today in Indonesia time is afternoon. However, perhaps you are still early morning. So welcome in a very good morning in UK time, and for Indonesian time in afternoon. So we have a wonderful session for today. You have 40 minutes, but if you necessary to add on of a time, so welcome. So you are the third speaker for today. So hope we have ample time to discuss regarding with your topic, Sharia financial skill in facing the era of a society 5.0. So stage is in yours, please.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. It's good to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I'm pleased to be joining this session and to be with you. I wish I could be physically there, but hopefully those days will come back. I really miss Indonesia and spending time in Indonesia with amazing colleagues and friends and students. It has been an amazing times. Of course, we have been going through a different kind of post-normal times, such as the pandemic COVID conditions, and immediately after the COVID conditions now, a new political economy emerging, and as a result of that, unfortunately, every country has been going through some economic difficulties with the energy crisis that we are facing, as well as the food insecurity. So these are some of the issues needs total reflection, and hopefully in this session I will share with you my thought on what Islamic moral economy's position could be, and in terms of responding to these developments that we have around us. And of course, that requires entirely different ways of looking at the reality. One, of course, one approach could be taking the reality as given and building around that reality. That is, of course, the project we have been pursuing in the Muslim world for quite a long time now. The other project could be, well, the reality is there, out there, imposing itself. But what is important at the same time, what kind of reality, alternative reality, we can constitute, the imaginary. The imaginaries are important for us, in particular the young generation, so that they can constitute the realities based on those imaginaries. And therefore, I appreciate the notion that reality is something that we have to tackle, but at the same time, we have to work out putting our efforts together, in particular to provide the new opportunity space for the young generation, such as in Indonesia. It's an amazing society, amazing economy. What new realities that we can constitute, which can better express our own expectations, and in particular the Islamic expectations, and in this case an Islamic economy, the Sharia economy, as you discussed. And by starting, of course, I have to state how this is an imperative for us, an imperative to change what I call the initial equation. Yes, we have been going through with this initial equation that we have around us, which based on capital and capital domination, and with our Islamic banking, we haven't discussed whether that definition of capital that has been imposed by the conventional knowledge and conventional practice and understanding is the Islamic definition of what capital is. And therefore, we have constituted Islamic banking and finance with a given definition of what capital is, without going into the critical thinking that perhaps Islam has a particular definition of what capital is, and therefore aims at a particular stakeholding relationship as opposed to imposed capital-dominated shareholding understanding. So this is very much critical for us to understand if we are to rebuild the economies and take an opportunity with this going on problems in relation to political economy, a new economic crisis after the COVID and pandemic. And these are some of the issues that I will be tackling. And it is my own humble view that alternative imaginaries can be constituted, and it should be constituted, so that we can we can offer help, we can offer hope. And that's the important part, offering hope. That has always been the Islamic position. There is always hope. And that is very much related. One thing I love in your region, in the larger Indonesian region, from layperson to very high level bureaucracy and the top level of political processes, everyone, when they attempt to define Islamic economics, they would refer to Rahmatul Alamin. And Indonesia is the only place where I see this particular definition of Islamic economics, which I really love. And therefore, that Rahmatul Alamin is an objective for us. It is a hope for us. And therefore, we have to see how that hope can be realized. And therefore, COVID and important, I wish we were in the same physical environment, therefore we could have exchange on those issues rather than I'm just speaking from here. But one an important consequence of COVID has been giving us this Islamic notion of directly connecting one to another. In other words, COVID has taught us that if I want to be healthy, I have to make sure that other people are healthy as well. Because the moment other people are not healthy, regardless of my protection, I will always get exposure. So that directly tells us an important objective function issue related to Islamic economics, which suggests that it is not utility maximization, it is not profit maximization as such, it is not individual maximization as a rational individual, but it is always a function in which other people's interests are also concerned. What I call the falah function, considering other people's interests in your own falah function, in your own utility function. So that's an important conclusion that we can draw, and therefore COVID should have encouraged us, therefore, looking for alternative views, alternative imaginations, or creating alternative, what I call initial equation. Even the definition of utility is very much my own. However, with COVID, as we have seen, the Islamic position of rather than utility, but falah, considering other people's interests as part of your equation, and objective function. And also, secondly, what we have seen, the failure of public policy all over the world, from a very rich economy from United States, for instance, to the smallest economies, the poorest economies in the world. What we have seen, governments have been spending huge and large amounts of monies to war economies, such as we have been witnessing through the war when Russia invaded Ukraine. Large amounts of money, every country, including in the Western world, have allocated large amounts of monies for war economies, as I call it, rather than defense. This is nothing to do with defense. However, when it comes to human well-being and well-being of other stakeholders, such as climate and environment, unfortunately, public policies have always failed all over the world in allocating the necessary fundings and the allocations for the well-beings of human as well as other stakeholders in the process. And therefore, we are talking about this new era, the sustainability, digital economy, and etc. But when we have this linear-based economic growth and development process, in other words, maximization and efficiency and assuming rational individual, unfortunately, reaching objectives that we are identifying, such as sustainable development, will not be able to take place, because this linear development suggests, on the one hand, a very rational individual maximizing, a shareholder value oriented process, and also continuous pressure on the resources of the world, which is no longer possible. Of course, circular economy is considered as an option, but that circular economy and sustainable development goals, despite the fact that they are offered as alternative ways of rescuing process, no, unless we change the initial equation, unless we change the definitions, what human is, what is the human objective function, what is capital, what is the role of capital, unless these definitions are properly provided, including within Islam and Islamic economics and finance, unfortunately, the real change will not take place. And therefore, a new definition, an individual, what is human, aiming falah, in which, of course, the other stakeholders' interests are considered. Therefore, socializing individual who considers the well-being of all the stakeholders, including other human beings, including environment, climate, society, and etc. Unfortunately, without changing that initial equilibrium, we will not be able to have real change. And therefore, Ihsani governance, as I call that, Ihsani governance is the equilibrium, establishing equilibrium in the society, in the economy, as Allah created the cosmos, created the world through that equilibrium, and therefore our objective is to sustain that equilibrium, inshallah. So these are important initial concepts. I know I have already taken quite a amount of time, but therefore what we have here, a lost dream, and therefore controversies. Controversies are important for us to identify what our objectives should be. But at the same time, the lost dreams that are created and imposed on us on Islamic economics should not be considered as our realities, but we have to look into creating our own imaginary and the realities. And therefore, the shift from moral economy over the centuries to neoclassical and neoliberal economy today. We are going through energy crisis, for instance. The energy crisis is because the oil, for instance, or the natural resources, water, and etc. These are natural resources. They should not be liberalized. They should not be privatized, but they should remain within the within the operation of the entire society so that it can deliver, because natural resources belongs to everyone. It's not company. You cannot allocate them to corporate sector. Even within the Islamic fiqh, for instance, water should not be privatized for profit. But unfortunately, with the neoliberal economy, including in the Muslim world, these privatizations have taken place, and natural resources have been allocated to the corporate sector. When we look at, for instance, there are exceptions. Norway, for instance, a oil and gas producing country, heavily, although they have given the right for oil, for instance, oil and gas, to private companies, to corporations, but they tax them heavily, such as 78% tax on them, so that the society should get its share out of that. And that's an important conclusion for us in terms of, and this is very much the Islamic position, the natural resources should not be privatized. And therefore, the self-regulated market economy, the way it emerged, with a particular definition of what human, the maximizing individual, the rational individual, and therefore resulting in maximizing an efficiency. However, our objective is not the maximization and efficiency. However, it is the well-being of all stakeholders. That's the Islamic position, very much so. And therefore, this linear growth has to be taken out of the initial equation. If we are to constitute an initial equation with a new definition of what human is, what human objectives are, and what is capital, what is labor, what is land, what is environment, all these definitions, we have to remove this linear growth imposed on the world order. And therefore, sustainable development goals, for instance, it sounds amazing, the new morality, a global morality, but on the other hand, because it doesn't touch the initial equation, it does not provide a new definition that I have been going through. Unfortunately, it is just a layer for moderating the consequences of the same definitions rather than providing an alternative definition. And therefore, the Islamic responses are important. But when we look at Islamic responses, very much with the experience of Islamic finance, as we can see, it's an amazing story, but it has not fulfilled the expected objective because it very much entangled with the barbarian conundrum that the accusation that Islam cannot deliver capital accumulation. Hence, somehow our entire objective shifted to respond to that question, saying that no, Islam can do capital accumulation. But we never discuss whether that capital accumulation is what Islam aims at. Unfortunately not. And therefore, I'm searching for the alternative meaning to rescue land, human, environment, even capital from the shackles of domination is very much important, and where Islamic economics, as I call Islamic moral economy, has something to say. And that something to say is very much the Ihsani society, Ihsani governance. Ihsan here means equilibrium, establishing equilibrium between the interests of different stakeholders is very much important for us. And in this, as part of that hope process, the emancipation of all the stakeholders and the empowerment of all the stakeholders, in other words, the well-being of all stakeholders is essentially important for us. And therefore, the hope, the paradigm of hope is very much important for us. When we look at the whole existing system in which we are trying to operate and create Islamic finance, is very much based on a definition of what capital and how capitalism imposed itself on us. Our legal system, our financial system, our economic system, they are all product of the same definition, same paradigm. Our constitutions, when we look at it again, identify itself with such definitions, rather than referring to on the actual ground what social formation that we have. And therefore, if we are to establish, operate our Islamic finance within the existing political, legal, and economic and financial system, unfortunately, it will essentialize only efficiency and maximization rather than, in actual fact, providing a new definition of what human and other stakeholders are. In other words, it results in the sustainability of capital hegemony, but would not go beyond. And therefore, and this is the reality in all the OIC member countries, because their constitutions, when we look at, it is based on essentialization of capital ideals. Some would say that with the social market, some would say that with the welfare state objectives, but the main logic remains the capital logic, and is not necessarily the Islamic logic or the Islamic objectives. And therefore, we are subjecting our Islamic economics and finance and the institutions to the same regulative, same legal environment, same governance system of capitalism, and therefore that results in deviance in Islamic finance. And therefore we have been discussing why Islamic finance is not fulfilling the objectives. And therefore the market logic versus the Islamic logic is an important question for us because of the capital domination. And the world that we are going through, and therefore just discussed all the time, is already an issue. The world is volatile, the world is uncertain, the world is complex, and the world is ambiguous. And these are an imposed reality for us. Volatility that we are talking, everything has become terribly volatile, terribly uncertain, terribly complex, and ambiguous. The reality is very much all this volatility, uncertainty, complex, and ambiguous. And therefore, we have to look into the systems rather than submitting to the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. We have to look into how we can create different constitution in terms of economy, society, and operation, and the definitions. I will just leave all this, although it is an exciting to look into how volatility, the change, the sudden change that we have suddenly ended up, for instance, the energy crisis and the energy price hikes, for instance. And therefore, under the normal consumption assumption. When we go to the class, when we teach economics, we always refer to the under the normal condition. But that does not represent reality beyond being an assumption in front of us. When we look at uncertain, again, it implies that we do not know what to believe, what to do, or what to believe, or not able to decide about something. And that is, however, modern science's promise of certainty is not there, is not working. The reality, as we can see, is nothing known for the world, human processes and systems. It is complex, involves a lot of different but related parts, and therefore we have to deal with that. However, modern science, including economics, heavily simplify the complexity, and therefore the offers that modern science as well as economics, modern economics does, unfortunately, does not produce long-lasting solutions because complicated has been terribly negated into simplification. However, the reality is complex. Ambiguous, implying that having or expressing more than one possible meaning, sometimes intentionally. In other words, however, the modern science tells us that everything is value-free. There is only one definition. 2 times 2 is 4. That's it. However, the reality is not that certain. There's the ambiguities, and therefore the value-free nature of modern science, including economics, fails. We have been told that because of the linear growth understanding, as well as the modern science, 5 is always bigger than 4. 5 is always superior to 4. But when we look at, for instance, your 5 includes riba, but 4 doesn't include riba, then for you, 4 is superior to 5. Or your 5 results in environmental consequences. If that is the case, your 4 does not have if your 4 doesn't have environmental negative spillovers, then your 4 is superior to 5. As you can see, this linear thinking that was imposed to us in reality doesn't work, such as the case of riba, such as the case of environmental issues and other sustainability related issues. In other words, there are cases that 4 can be superior to 5. And therefore, this value-free definition is not acceptable. So what we have, therefore, with the COVID and the continuation with the COVID, the domination of capital. So everything is very much related to the movement of capital, creating this fallacy and the fictitiousness. When we look at how, therefore, dehumanization is taking place in through the financial system, creating this indebted individual. When we look at the heavy nature of financialized economy is a reality, and unfortunately, through Islamic finance, rather than following the Islamic principles, allowing Islamic finance to be subject to the market conditions, we are following the same. When we look at the world GDP is only a small fraction of financial assets in the world. And those financial assets are entirely fictitious. World GDP apparently is only 8.3% of the total financial assets. But these financial assets are not reality, because if they were reality, that should have been GDP is equal to financial assets, or GDP has to be larger than the financial assets in the economies. But no, as you can see, there's a huge gap between the financialization. If you look at, for instance, GDP at current prices, at the top right-hand side, you see the impact of global financial crisis and COVID. Immediately after the COVID, as you can see, the recovery, how the jump has taken place. But again, that fictitiousness is important. Again, when the COVID was around, still the financial markets, as you can see on the left-hand side, on the middle, as well as in the bottom graphs, the financial markets were still gaining. The economy wasn't operating, but the financial markets were operating and making profit somehow. So these are important fictitiousness for us to understand. And therefore, against every 87 cents real assets, there is 10.44 financial claims. And that's the reality, the creation of indebted individual that we have. Again, the humanization part of creating indebted individuals. And hence, by becoming indebted, we are losing our liberties. And therefore, when we look at the experience of Prophet ﷺ, for instance, he asked refuge from debtness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was considered losing the one's liberty and the dependence. And therefore, when we look at, for instance, this graphs in front of you, the COVID impact is very much reasonable in the financial markets, but immediately during the COVID, after the initial impact, even during the COVID, when the economy was not operating, as we can see, the financial performances of the financial markets. And therefore, the unbearable reality around us. The climate has become an important problem for the world. Even everyone during COVID, a large survey indicated by the UNDP that people considered climate as an important problem. But looking at the difficulties that capitalism and this heavy consumption economy fueled by financialization results in. Look at the nature, the birds, the impact of birds and turtles on the nature, and look at the human impact on the nature. And that impact is very much created with the expansion of credits, expansion of financialization, the heavy consumption, and that is not acceptable. And when we look at the Islamic banks, their financing nature, what we see heavily consumer durables-based financing goes from Islamic banking. In other words, Islamic banks are in the same way are financing, unfortunately, human consumption rather than restricting that consumption in line with the real resources that we have. In other words, this linear growth that has been imposed on us, okay, that we are in a race, we have to maximize the return, profit, utilities, and etc. continuously. And that has become a real challenge for us. The time apparently is an issue, so I'll just quickly pass through. Even when we look at how the holy sites, for instance, have been heavily consumed, okay? When you look at, for instance, the entrance of one of the towers here, it will say that, welcome to the complete elite's land. However, Mecca, Haram, supposed to be the equal of the equals, the most equal place on earth, yet at the building, as you can see on the photograph in the middle, it says that in the entrance, welcome to the complete elite's land. And creation of all those buildings, undermining the historicity of the environment is an important issue for us, and unfortunately financed through Islamic finance. So these are the realities that we have. In other words, what you have in front of us, this domination on the right-hand side. As you can see, accessibility is prevented for majority of us, and therefore equality doesn't solve the problem, as you can see. And in order to have justice, therefore ihsan, in other words, those who have the domination, they have to give up their domination and help the others to come to a certain level. In other words, equilibrium, establishing equilibrium in the process, so that people can have accessibility, because resources are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and people need to have accessibility. In the reality, even as you can see, most of us is in the negative, as you can see on the right-hand side. And therefore, like in the middle, how those who are the dominant should give up their dominance, and hence allow others to provide accessibility. When you remember, for instance, when the Hijrah took place, when the Muslim community moved from Mecca to Medina, Prophet ﷺ established that equilibrium between Muhajirun and the Ansar. And it wasn't a charitable giving. Prophet ﷺ did not ask the Ansar to give charity to the Muhajirun. No, he made them partners. And that is what it is. Those who are in a better conditions are expected to give up their own so that the equilibrium can be established in the society and the accessibility can be possible. And beyond that, the Islamic position, this right-hand side, rather than having barrier to access to resources, how we can remove the barriers before even without even considering a distribution, people can have access to resources, as you can see on the right-hand side. Even beyond that, entirely removing barriers, that is the Islamic imagination. How we can remove the barriers entirely so that people can have access, such as the right-hand side. And that is very much the Islamic moral economic position, emancipation and empowerment through resource accessibility. And therefore, yes, we want to build back. We want to respond to the COVID conditions and the economic crisis, but that should not be based on the existing definitions and the capital domination. What is important, how we can give accessibility. As you can see on the screen at the bottom of it, the last sentence, it will say just the initial equation has to change. The neoliberal initial equation based on only capital and labor, however, labor is defined by capital, has to change. In other words, how we can bring all the stakeholders to the equation and accept that they have their own interest here. And therefore, we have to locate finance to its own place by defining what is finance. Finance is not about making money, it's function. It's only function to the objectives of society. So it has to be embedded into the objective function. And therefore, it is very much related financing the objective of the society. It is not using finance to create wealth. That is not acceptable in Islam. There has to be real activity. There has to be objective of finance has to be linked to the objective of society. Therefore, when we look at the emerging political economy of COVID, of course, the economy, the business cycles, difficulties, labor market issues, and this energy price hike. Huge increases in inequality that we have. Financial markets, however, and the corporate sector, however, is becoming stronger, richer, and dominant. And the socioeconomic impact, of course, because of COVID and the economic difficulties, infrastructure projects, including climate and environmental projects and the financing has to be stopped. Unemployment is increasing, alienation as a psychological conditions, and furthering the indebted man and woman, that has become a real problem for us. So when we look at Islamic finance and the development of Islamic finance, unfortunately, we see that how the financial sphere, Islamic banks heavily investing in financial spheres and consumer durables rather than the production sphere, rather than encouraging real economy, as you can see with the graphs here. From 2000 to 2013 and 2014 to 2020. So the financialization is taking place in Islamic finance rather than solving the problems of ordinary people on the street. So time is an issue. I'm passing, but whichever the country we are looking at, the sectors that has been benefiting heavily from Islamic banking, mostly real estate, consumer durables, banking, and finance services. Again, when we look at the particular modes of financing from Islamic banks, again, it is very much financial oriented, tawarruk, murabaha, and ijara type of products rather than real economy oriented products. Even when we look at, for instance, from this this chart, in the case of Malaysia from 2014 to 2016, the organized tawarruk increased by 104%, indicating the increased debt in the society. And therefore, yes, we have those aspirations and realities. And Islamic finance has moved from the aspirations. So this embeddedness and financialization is taking place. It is profit and loss sharing and risk sharing is not taking place. It is only a commercial banking model. Risk shifting is for shareholders' interest as opposed to the stakeholding for risk sharing. So all these difficulties that we are facing, the form is essentialized against the substance, in other words. And therefore, looking at from that objective, so Islamic finance, there isn't this success story when it comes to the transactional base. In other words, Islamic finance has been successful in terms of moving capital, but when it comes to transforming the society, unfortunately, that transformation is not taking place. It is shareholder value maximization because it's based on the same definition of capital. And therefore, we have to go into stakeholding governance model and ihsani governance model in the society at large so that Islamic banking as well can utilize the Islamic objectives. So rather than being a capital-centered, we have to decenter the capital-oriented Islamic finance into an Islamic objective. And this is, of course, a problem is the partial equation issue. In other words, the entire system, as I discussed in the beginning, based on capital limited. Your legal system, your regulative system, your political system, everything on capital. However, the Islamic objective goes beyond that. And therefore, even if you try to do Islamic finance within these constraints, unfortunately, in the end, you submit to the hegemony of capital. And therefore, we must understand the Islamic economy as part of the general system of Islam, which organizes different aspects of life in society. In other words, the initial equation has to change. And therefore, whether Islamic finance can help to change that initial equation. When it works within the institutional logic of market economy, the same definition, unfortunately, capital domination is there. Islamic finance does not, therefore, cannot change that initial equation unless we provide the necessary momentum for the general system. And therefore, the debt-based nature of capitalist system has become the reality of Islamic finance, of course. Of course, in recent times, Islamic fintech type of new emergences are taking place. They give hope, but on the other hand, such innovations on the one hand helps the democratization of Islamic finance, but they remain still within the capital domination, the same definition of capital. And therefore, their change can be terribly limited. Islamic microfinance, again, same things. However, in Islamic microfinance, we have some interesting experiments such as the BMTs in Indonesia and the Islamic Bank of Bangladesh in Bangladesh. Islamic social finance. Of course, we have gone back to when
Professor
Islamic banking does not deliver, is failed to deliver.
I'm sorry,
therefore,
Professor
we are talking
Mehmet.
about, yes, time is an issue, I'm finishing.
Okay.
And therefore, Islamic social finance has become the new debate that we have. The burden created by financialization is offered to Islamic social finance to overcome what zakat and other social welfare institutions. These are important, these are essential, but these are not related to capital. And also the Islamic social finance term is a financializing again. And therefore we should use the terminology Islamic social welfare and contribute to that ihsani society, how the capital cannot dominate us. And time, again, as I am reminded as well, just I'll share one quick figure and then I'll finish with that. So therefore, what we are talking is the whole new definition of iqtisad as opposed to economics. Iqtisad very much reminds us the objective function, directing towards an objective through path in line with the aim. And it is just share and hence justice. And therefore, Iqtisad relates to giving the right of everything and hence all the stakeholders to locate everything in its place and establishing justice. So therefore, when we look at even the definition, when we start defining, for instance, as opposed to economics, what is Iqtisad, the Islamic term, when we look at the definition, then what we end up, a real economy, importance of community, the fictitiousness, removing fictitiousness, commodification is not accepted, water cannot be commodified, energy cannot be commodified, these are goods. Everyone has to have accessibility. That's the Islamic moral economy's future. The justice system, distribution, and these all become essential qualities. In other words, it is not the prices that determine everything as economics tells us. On the contrary, Islamic moral economy would say that everything that comes together determine price. Why? There's the inherent value. What is that? Because of creation. Because Allah created everyone and everyone has to have equal accesses to the resources, and therefore all the other resources and their interest has to be protected as well, such as environment. And therefore we come to this paradigm of initial equation, the mizan, adala, and ihsan, and with that I will finish. Mizan implies that Allah created the world with an order, and it is our objective, therefore, to ensure that that order continues, that balance continues, so that sustainability problems does not emerge. But the sustainability can be ensured by giving the right of every stakeholder to them. Because adala, the justice requires that. Why? And how we can achieve that? Ihsan. Those who are in powerful position can help the others to reach to a certain level. Because everything and everyone, human, land, labor, environment, climate, everything that is created by Allah with a mizan, balance, it is our objective to sustain that and give the right of everything to everyone. And therefore, riba prohibition, the centers capital, provides a new definition of capital for us, place everything into its place. And therefore, riba is not just, riba prohibition is not how we can do the transaction by overcoming the process of capitalism. No, it is not just a moving capital from A to B, how we can halalize that. No, what is capital? That's the definition. Riba related to the political economy of Islam is not an instrument of capitalism. Again, zakat, for instance, is the right of the society that has to be given society, because Allah created all those resources for everyone to have access. So when you privatize resources, then you are preventing people to have access, and therefore they have to be compensated, and zakat therefore works as an important instrument for universal income. And therefore ihsani governance leading to ihsani society, it is our hope, it is our objective, and it is a hope to heal the problems that capitalism has created, the problems that we face with COVID, the problems that we are creating currently with the global political economy that is around us. And hopefully, as I mentioned in the beginning, this beautiful definition of Islamic economics, Rahmatul Alamin, we can work within this conceptualization, mizan, within mizan, adala, and ihsan to make a difference, so that we can provide hope for people. Sorry for my time, and thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Thank you. If there is any question, if there are any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Thank you so much. Actually, I don't want to interrupt your time, because it's very rigorous explanation and also well thought. However, the time is limited, so we can accommodate perhaps additional explanation you might add in a question and answer session. So finance is a function of objective of society. That is a keyword that I grasped from your presentation. And now the new equation is mizan adalah ihsan. Islamic moral economic in the future, justice, equality, and rahmatan alamin. So that is the very important keyword your presentation for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So now we open a session about say 5 to 10 minutes to those who might have observation and also question. Kindly raise your hand, or you can type in a chat box for your question. So the first one, anyone who raised hand in a Zoom chat, I'm not noticed here. All right, but perhaps waiting for the question raised by a participant, I have a special question as well. How is the say your prescription or strategy to be rahmatal alamin, Islamic moral economic in the future between justice, equality, and capitalism? I saw several people, father, mother, and a son climbing up, and then with different stature of to see in the future, because your presentation also mentioned about fallacy, fictitiousness, sustainability, linear growth, and how it's combined so we can survive in the future for rahmatan alamin. So perhaps my question as appetite for this afternoon time. Go ahead, Professor Mehmet, for your thought and observation and answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think as you have fantastically summarized my position, it is the resources. Resource accessibility has become a major problem for us. All the resources are rahmatul alamin from Allah to everyone to have access, such as water, for instance. When we go to a supermarket, we see all those different bottled waters, and they all have different prices. What makes them, that is what we call commodification. Water is a good. We have to have it. Environment have to have it, land have to have it. It is a good, without which we cannot survive. However, modern economic capitalism has converted water into commodity. So if you have money, you have accessibility to water. It's a commodity. That entirely runs against the Islamic moral economy. For instance, just a simple example. In other words, water is dominated, and water is very much have become a source of profit making. But by nature, it is created by for everyone. In other words, the inherent value. Being created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, each one of us has to have access to water as a good. And therefore, this requires to make changes to the business model that we have around us. The business model based on capitalism, which requires everything to be commodified. Everything becomes a commodity to the extent that in the modern world, now there is a market for kidney. Kidney has become a commodity at the same time, rather than helping people to rescue their life. And therefore, why this is happening is because the whole business model, the whole definition, the initial definition, what is human, what is labor, what is human effort, what is land, what is environment and climate. All those definitions are provided by the capitalist economy. And capitalist economy defines everything in line with its own objective of maximization. However, maximization results in oppression of the resources. The more you squeeze the environment, the more you squeeze land, the more you squeeze individual, you increase your profit, your maximization of your profit. So therefore, we have to move from that to a new equation. And in that new equation, what we have, one, considering all the stakeholders in the process. All the stakeholders have to be part of the equation, not only capital and labor, as production function would tell us, for instance, in conventional economy. Our production function have to consider each and every stakeholder, individual in terms of human efforts as labor, society, land, environment, and other stakeholders depending from one economy to another. And only then capital comes to the equation in the Islamic model economy. And therefore, we have to create our own equation. And within this Islamic production function, of course, each factors of production, human, land, climate, environment, society goes into equation independently rather than being defined by capital. Okay, that's very much important for us as well. And if their earnings are not enough to have a dignified life, and then the Baytul Mal through zakat will provide people. And when we look at the Islamic notion, therefore the importance of the commodification, not commodifying everything. For instance, the right of society in our equation production function is included as well in the production function, the right of society. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not determine what wage is, what the return for land is, what the return for capital is. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala determines what the return to society is through zakat. Because zakat is a compensation of the exclusion of people from the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for everyone to have access. And therefore zakat determined by Allah because people are excluded from the resources and therefore they have to be compensated. In other words, you have an extended stakeholding based production function, and in which all the stakeholders are considered, not only the capitalist production function where capital is dominant and also labor only, and labor is defined through capital. However, each factors of production here, each stakeholder's extended stakeholder in the Islamic function considers the extended stakeholder and their independence so that they can develop a dignified life. And environment has to be returned as well. Climate has to be returned as well so that this ihsan can ensure the mizan, the balance, the sustainability in the society. I wish we had this blackboard or the whiteboards. I could draw all this and show, but unfortunately time is an issue and we do not have that opportunity. I hope that responds to your question.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Yeah, it's very comprehensive and also well thought. Your emphasizing in your topic talk, very productive talk today. I saw one question. So from Zaid. So perhaps you have a very concise question because time is running. Go ahead, Zahid. Host, perhaps Zahid could provide for access.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Thanks for a great pleasure for me, Zetmo Nambari from Undip Indonesia, to have a chance asking you, Mr. Mehmet Sutai. My question is, how do you see could the equity crowdfunding Sharia as Islamic social finance develop the micro business such as MSMEs and startups? Just that, thanks for the great opportunity. Those are.
All right,
thanks.
Thank you, Said Ambari. And I can catch one another participant, Johan. So a brief question after that, and then Professor Mehmet might answer those two questions. Johan? or perhaps waiting for Johan able to speak, and then maybe Professor Mehmet, you can answer.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, thank you very much. As I mentioned as well, Islamic social finance has become the main terminology around which we are reconstituting Islamic economics. Because what we have seen, Islamic banks and financial institutions are not doing what is expected of them to deliver to the larger welfare of the societies, rather than because they are shareholder value maximization, rather than being stakeholding value maximization. Now, one thing, as I mentioned, I don't use the term Islamic social finance because these are not financing institutions. These are not financing instruments. They are social welfare institutions. So that distinction is very much important. Social welfare institutions. And they have a particular objective defined: zakat, waqf, sadaqah, and others. So they have a particular definition to impose. And of course, we can reconfigure them to empower, because our objective is to empower people, and therefore how we can use zakat, waqf, and other instruments, other social welfare instruments, to enable people to empower. And therefore, in recent years, there has been some positive developments in terms of seeing zakat funds being created, and through zakat funds, have people have been motivated through micro businesses to create their own features, so that the empowerment of individual, the emancipation and empowerment can be possible. Having said that, so there's a great opportunity space to empower people, okay? But we have to be very careful, such as I see this quotation from the Ottoman experience of Waqf, and every paper somehow on Waqf repeat. It says that Waqf was an amazing institution in the history, so you could born in a Waqf, you could grow in a Waqf, the Waqf would educate you, the Waqf would get you married, give you the job, and even if you die, they will take care of your funeral. Now, that is a very stagnant Waqf. That Waqf has not done anything to empower individual, but just to get the person to consume. Our objective with Islamic social welfare institutions, therefore, to help people to emancipate themselves from the difficulties and then empower themselves so that they become zakat payers. They become establisher of the waqf. So that has to be objective function in which we have to locate Islamic social welfare institutions. And the second issue, while Islamic social welfare institutions are amazing and contribute to business creations and empowering individuals, our objective at the same time, and importantly, work on Islamic banks and financial institutions to deliver according to initial promise. The initial promise that finance has to work within the objective function of society, within that Rahmatul Alamin, so that they cannot just escape working through capital and ignoring the rest. And therefore, we have to create a new logic, the Islamic logic. So the market logic very much squeezed Islamic banking into only a negative screening. Riba is haram out, gharar is out, and etc. But we have to bring what positive outcomes that Islamic finance can bring, that has to be identified, and Islamic finance has to work towards that objective as well. So such opportunity space of creating micro businesses, SMEs, and etc. should not be the duty, should not only be the duty of the Waqf and Zakat, but importantly, as business opportunities, Islamic banks and financial institutions should be reconfigured according to objective function, according to stakeholding approach, so that they have to provide the necessary funding for such opportunities. They cannot just say that it is not profitable, because our objective function is not efficiency, is not maximization. It is the social good of all the stakeholders. So it is not only the shareholders getting a value, the stakeholders have to get value. And therefore, we have to motivate this change, how we can provide a new paradigm, the initial equation, changing initial equation, how a new paradigm can be provided for Islamic banks and financial institutions as an Islamic logic so that they can operate within that. Islamic logic is larger than the capitalist logic, has to consider all the stakeholders. Hope that responds to your question.
Thank you very much, Professor Mehmet Asutai, Durham University, UK, for your contribution and also well thought. So I'm not adding a conclusion because the concluding remark by Professor Mehmet Asutai is already in an ultimate presentation. Thank you so much being with us in Diponegoro University, Indonesia. Greeting from Indonesia to UK. Let we saying hamdalah, alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, because the presentation are going smoothly and with well thought, and we are very benefited with your contribution and also what with your experience, knowledge, and theoretical framework. Thank you so much, and myself, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Professor. Thank you very much for having me. Wishing you all the best, and hopefully we can meet in better times.
All right.
To make a difference in the world.
Yes, inshallah. So we meet each other in different occasion, and also greeting from Indonesia with good health and healthy, prosperous, and everyone in a good condition. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Wishing you all the best. Bye-bye.
Assalamualaikum. That is our last session for today. So the time is already running out, but since we have something that very fruitful and useful, then on behalf of as moderator, I might have mistake and others uncomfortability, so that is my fault, and all the function and also our participation toward the panitia and other participant here is highly appreciated. Thank you very much, and return to the MC. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Alright, please give applause for our webinar session. Thank you very much to all the speakers who have presented excellent and insightful materials. We also thanks a lot to our moderator, Professor Indah, as the moderator who has led the discussion very well. All the participants and distinguished guests, finally we have come to the end of the international webinar 12 Sehati Undip. Before closing today's event, we will have the last group photo session. For that, we ask all the speakers and the participants in this webinar to turn your camera on. To the operator, you may take the picture. Alright, I will count 3, 2, 1. Okay, next slide. 3, 2, 1. Alright. Next slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay, last slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much for your participation in this photo session. Next, I would like to remind to all the participants to fill out the attendance list. And I also would like to remind for all the competition participants to don't forget to attend the 12 Sehati awarding at 3 o'clock this afternoon. On behalf of the entire committee, we would like to extend once again our greatest appreciation to all of your support for participating this today's event. We also would like to express our deepest appreciation to all our sponsors, which are Ikatan Alumni FEB Undip, Dompet Duafa, Inisiatif Zakat Indonesia, and Bank Jateng, who has helped us to run this event very well. Well, it has been my pleasure to host this event, so on behalf of the entire committee, we really do apologize if still there are many shortcomings in this event. Lastly, let us close this event by reciting ayat Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Thank you very much for all your participation. My name is Fadia Utami. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you in International Webinar 13 Sehati Undip.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourself. Exclusive in this event, the international webinar with our theme optimizing the role of Islamic economic towards sustainable finance for the economic recovery, and our special speaker, Mr. Sandiaga Salahuddin Uno, Mr. Professor Mehmet Asute, Mr. Adiwarman Aswar Kareem, Mr. Lukin Tamani, 12 Sharia economic activity.